You
The
think you can just
Mafia
walk in
boss
here and tell me
slapped the
what to
black
do?
maid in
You
front of his
are
guests.
fired.
The room went
Wait,
cold.
please don't do this.
Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Jasmine Carter, the Black Maid, had worked for Vincent Coletti, the notorious Mafia boss, for nearly a year. She had learned to keep her head down, do her job, and stay out of the way of Vincent and his guests. The mansion was always filled with tension, from the towering security guards to the lavish guests who came and went, their laughter and voices echoing through the halls. Jasmine knew her place in this world, or so she thought. It was a typical evening when the incident happened. The large dining room was buzzing with the sound of wealthy men in tailored suits and women in glittering dresses, enjoying the dinner party that Vincent had hosted. Jasmine, dressed in her simple maid's uniform, was serving drinks to the guests, keeping her head low, moving quietly between the tables. She had seen this scene many times before, rich, powerful men laughing and talking as if the world was their playground. They never noticed her, and that was just fine with her. That was, until she crossed paths with Vincent. He was seated at the head of the table, surrounded by his closest associates. As she approached to refill his drink, he looked up, his cold gaze meeting hers. His lips curled into a smirk, and the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift. "Hey, Jasmine," he called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I think it's time you clean up my glass." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her composure, doing what she was asked without protest. As she leaned over to collect the glass, Vincent's hand shot out, grabbing her arm with surprising force. "What are you doing in my personal space?" he sneered. The room fell silent. Jasmine froze. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped moving. She could hear the distant hum of the chandelier, the soft clink of silverware being set down, but nothing else. Every eye in the room was on them. Vincent's grip tightened, and the smirk on his face deepened. "You're lucky I don't fire you right here," he growled. The other guests exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them dared to speak. Jasmine's eyes burned with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She had been humiliated before, but this time, something in her snapped. She wasn't going to let him get away with this. Slowly, she lifted her chin, meeting Vincent's eyes with an unwavering gaze. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady and clear, though her heart was pounding in her chest. The room went cold. For a moment, it was as if time stood still. Vincent stared at her, taken aback by the boldness in her eyes. The guests looked around, unsure of what to do or say. Jasmine slowly pulled her arm from his grasp, and with a final glance at Vincent, she turned and walked out of the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in that room knew one thing for sure. Jasmine had just made it clear that she was not just a maid, and she would not tolerate being treated like one. Jasmine stood outside the mansion, her heart pounding as she tried to steady her breathing. The heavy door had slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing in the empty hallway, marking the end of the evening. She had never felt more humiliated in her life, yet there was a strange sense of strength swelling inside her. The sting of Vincent's touch still burned on her arm, but something about the way she had stood her ground made her feel like she had won, even though she had left the room in defeat. The night was cold, the moon hanging high above the estate, casting long shadows across the front lawn. Jasmine stood in the stillness, her thoughts racing. She had worked for Vincent for almost a year, quietly doing her job, never causing trouble, never drawing attention to herself. But tonight, something had shifted. For the first time, she had refused to be invisible. For the first time, she had shown him that she was not just a maid, that she had a voice, and that she would not allow herself to be humiliated any longer. She knew that things would never be the same again. As Jasmine walked away from the mansion, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease creeping over her. She didn't know what Vincent would do next, but she knew he would not take this lightly. Mafia bosses like him did not tolerate being disrespected, and Jasmine had no illusions about the kind of man he was. Yet, there was something else in her mind, a feeling she couldn't quite shake. Vincent had been shocked by her words. He had never seen her like that before, and for a brief moment, She had seen something in his eyes. A flicker of doubt. A question. Jasmine couldn't help but wonder if, in that instant, he had seen her not as just another servant, but as someone who mattered. As she walked through the quiet streets, her mind kept drifting back to that moment. The room had gone cold. Vincent had never expected her to speak out. Jasmine smiled bitterly at the thought. The coldness that had filled the room was a reflection of her own emotions. She had been cold to him, detached. For so long, she had hidden her true self, afraid of being cast aside, of being overlooked. But tonight, that had changed. She didn't know if it would be enough to change her situation, but she was determined to find out. The next morning, Jasmine returned to the mansion, her heart heavy with anticipation. She had spent the night wrestling with her thoughts, wondering what Vincent would do now. Would he fire her? Would he ignore her? Or would he confront her, demand an explanation for her behavior? As she walked through the front door, she was met with silence. The staff moved around her, avoiding her gaze, as if they knew something had shifted, but were too afraid to acknowledge it. Jasmine walked past them, her eyes fixed on the stairs that led to Vincent's office. She could feel the weight of the building bearing down on her, the air thick with tension. But she didn't falter. She had already made her decision. She was no longer afraid of him. As she reached the top of the stairs, she knocked softly on the door to Vincent's office. There was a long pause before she heard his voice from inside. Come in. Jasmine opened the door slowly, her heart racing. Vincent was sitting at his desk, his back turned to her as he flipped through a stack of papers. He didn't look up as she entered, but the air in the room felt different. She could feel his presence, his eyes on her even though he didn't acknowledge her. What do you want? He asked, his voice cold, distant. Jasmine took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. I want to talk, she said, her voice firm but calm. Vincent finally looked up at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was palpable, a silent battle of wills. You want to talk? He repeated, his tone laced with disbelief. Jasmine nodded. Yes, I do. I need you to understand that what happened last night. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was standing up for all of us. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. All of us, he asked, his voice low. Jasmine nodded again. Yes, all of us who are invisible to you. All of us who are treated like we don't matter. I won't be quiet anymore. There was a long pause, and for a moment, Jasmine wondered if she had made a mistake. But then, Vincent stood up from his chair, walking over to the window. You're not like the others, he said quietly, his voice almost thoughtful. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat at his words. Was he acknowledging her? Was he finally seeing her as something more than just a maid? You think you're special? Vincent's voice cut through her thoughts. Jasmine swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure. No, she said softly, but I think I deserve to be treated with respect. For a moment, the room was silent again. Then, Vincent turned to face her, his gaze intense. Respect, he repeated, as if the word tasted strange on his tongue. Jasmine nodded, her eyes never leaving his. Yes, respect. It's the least anyone deserves. Vincent walked over to his desk and sat down, his fingers tapping on the edge of the wood. I don't know what you expect from me, Jasmine, he said finally. But I'll give you this. You've got guts. I'll give you that. Jasmine stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where this conversation would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life. The following days were filled with a strange sense of tension. Jasmine could feel the eyes of the staff on her, their curiosity mixed with a hint of fear. Word had spread quickly about her confrontation with Vincent, and while some of them admired her boldness, others were wary of the consequences. Vincent had not fired her, but that didn't mean everything was forgiven. His gaze, whenever it met hers, was still cold, distant, and for a few days, he avoided speaking to her altogether. Jasmine kept to her routine, trying to stay focused on her work, but something had changed. The atmosphere in the mansion was different, heavier. The tension between her and Vincent hung in the air like an unspoken truth. Then, one afternoon, as Jasmine was polishing the grand chandelier in the dining room, Vincent walked in. He didn't acknowledge her presence right away, but she could feel his gaze on her. She kept her eyes on the task at hand, not willing to show any sign of weakness. Jasmine, Vincent finally said, his voice breaking the silence. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. "Yes, sir," she responded, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. Vincent's footsteps grew louder as he approached. "Come down for a moment." Jasmine climbed down the ladder slowly, her eyes never leaving the floor. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew this conversation would be different from the others. When she reached the ground, Vincent was standing with his hands in his pockets, watching her with a contemplative expression. "I've been thinking about what happened the other night," he said, his voice lower than usual. Jasmine swallowed, waiting for him to continue. "And I've realized that maybe I misjudged you," he said, his eyes meeting hers. There was a moment of silence before he spoke again. "You've got a lot of guts. Not many people would have done what you did." Jasmine didn't know how to respond. For a moment, she thought she might be dreaming. Vincent Coletti, the man who had humiliated her in front of his guests, was admitting that she had earned his respect. She remained silent, unsure of what to say next. "I'm not the kind of man who shows respect easily," Vincent continued, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "But you're different. You've got something that others don't." Jasmine felt a strange warmth rise in her chest. She didn't know what to make of his words, but for the first time, she felt seen. Not just as a maid, not just as someone who was there to serve, but as someone who mattered. "I never wanted your respect," Jasmine finally said, her voice quiet but firm. "I just wanted to be treated like I mattered." Vincent looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke again. "You've got more than that now." He turned and walked away without another word, leaving Jasmine standing there, stunned. She wasn't sure what had just happened, but she knew one thing for certain. Something had changed. That night, as Jasmine lay in her small, humble room in the servants' quarters, her mind raced. The words Vincent had spoken echoed in her mind. "You've got more than that now." Did that mean he was finally seeing her for who she truly was? Or was it just another passing moment, a brief lapse in his usual cold demeanor? Jasmine didn't know. But for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were beginning to shift. The next few days passed in a blur. Vincent still didn't speak to her much, but the tension between them had lessened. He seemed to be watching her from a distance, as though he was waiting for something. Jasmine wasn't sure what he was waiting for, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation building within her. One morning, as she was cleaning the study, Vincent walked in unexpectedly. He looked different today, dressed casually, his usual stern expression softened. "Jasmine," he said, his voice more relaxed than usual. "There's something I need you to do for me." Jasmine looked up from her work, surprised. "What is it, sir?" Vincent hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I want you to meet me in the office. There's something we need to discuss." Jasmine nodded, her heart pounding. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that could change everything. She followed Vincent to his office, her mind racing with possibilities. When they arrived, he closed the door behind them and motioned for her to sit. "I've been thinking," he began, "about how I've treated you, and the way I've treated everyone else who works here. I've realized that I've been too harsh, too demanding, and that's not the way to run a business or a household." Jasmine sat in stunned silence, not sure if she was hearing him correctly. Was Vincent actually apologizing? "You've been more than just a maid," he continued. "You've been the one person here who's shown me what really matters: integrity, courage, and honesty. And I want to make things right." Jasmine's heart swelled in her chest. This wasn't the man she had first met. This wasn't the cold, arrogant mafia boss she had feared. This was someone different, someone who was finally beginning to see the value in those around him. "I want you to have a say in how things are run around here," Vincent said, his eyes meeting hers. "You've earned it." Jasmine didn't know how to respond. She had never imagined this kind of change, not in a million years. But here she was, standing in front of Vincent Coletti, a man who had once looked down on her, now offering her something more than she had ever expected. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said quietly, her voice filled with resolve. "I want to make this place better, for everyone." Vincent nodded, his expression softening. Then it settled. Days passed, and the change that Jasmine had been hoping for began to manifest slowly. Vincent's behavior toward her had shifted. He no longer ignored her presence, nor did he treat her like a mere maid. There was a new level of respect in his interactions with her, and that made Jasmine feel a sense of pride she had never experienced before. She could tell that the others in the mansion noticed the difference. Whispers had started to spread among the staff. Some were curious about what had happened, while others were more cautious, unsure if they should follow Jasmine's lead or keep their distance from the powerful Mafia boss. Jasmine wasn't sure what Vincent's new attitude meant, but she knew it was a step in the right direction. She was still cautious around him, not sure if this respect would last, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of empowerment. She had earned this. She had fought for it. And now, she was seeing the results. One afternoon, Vincent called her into his office. He had been working late, his desk covered in papers and contracts. As Jasmine walked in, he didn't look up right away, but she could feel his gaze on her as soon as she stepped into the room. "Jasmine," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. "I need you to help me with something." She paused for a moment, surprised by the request. "Of course, sir. What do you need?" Vincent looked up from his papers, meeting her eyes. "I've been thinking about the changes we talked about. I want to make some adjustments around here. Some of the business decisions I've made in the past, they haven't been the best." Jasmine nodded, not sure where this conversation was going, but listening intently. "I need someone who can give me an honest perspective," he continued. "Someone who isn't afraid to speak up, even when it's difficult." Jasmine's heart raced. She had never imagined that Vincent would ever ask for her opinion on something like this. "I'm not sure I'm the right person, sir," she said carefully. Vincent smiled, a small, almost genuine smile. "You are. You've proven that to me. I trust you." Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. This was more than just a shift in their dynamic. This was an invitation to be a part of something bigger than she had ever imagined. She had always seen herself as nothing more than a maid, a servant in the grand scheme of Vincent's world. But now, she was being asked to contribute, to help steer the direction of something that had always been out of her control. "I'll help however I can," Jasmine said, her voice steady with determination. Vincent nodded. "I want you to start by reviewing some of the contracts. I've been ignoring the finer details, and I'm sure I've missed something. I need your eyes on this." Jasmine felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never worked on anything like this before, but she had always been quick to learn. This was her chance to prove that she wasn't just a maid, that she had more to offer than just her ability to clean and serve. She approached the desk, looking over the contracts Vincent had left for her. The language was complicated, filled with jargon she had never dealt with before, but she felt a spark of confidence as she began to go through the pages. She knew she could do this. She had always been sharp, always paying attention to details. And now, for the first time, she had the chance to put those skills to use. Hours passed, and Jasmine lost herself in the documents. She scribbled notes in the margins, marked sections that seemed off, and began to piece together the bigger picture. Vincent had given her the responsibility of reviewing these contracts, and she was determined to do it right. She worked through the night, her eyes growing tired, but her mind sharp. When she finished, she sat back in the chair, exhausted but satisfied. She had found several discrepancies, terms that could potentially cost Vincent millions if he wasn't careful. She couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This wasn't just about proving herself to Vincent. It was about proving to herself that she had value, that she wasn't just a maid. She was someone who could make a real difference. The next morning, she brought the contracts to Vincent's office. He was already there, as usual, looking over his notes. Jasmine placed the papers on his desk, carefully pointing out the sections she had flagged. Vincent looked over them, his eyes scanning the pages. He paused when he saw the discrepancies she had highlighted. "You've done well," he said, his voice a mix of admiration and surprise. Jasmine couldn't help but smile, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She had earned his praise. But more than that, she had earned his respect. "Thank you, sir," she replied, keeping her voice steady. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. "You've proven that you're more than just a maid, Jasmine. I've been wrong about you. I've underestimated you." Jasmine felt a lump form in her throat, the weight of his words settling over her. For so long, she had believed that she would never be anything more than what Vincent had seen her as, a servant, a tool for his convenience. But now, she was something more. She was someone who mattered. "I'm not doing this for you," Jasmine said softly, meeting his gaze. "I'm doing it for me. I've worked hard to get here, and I'm not going to stop now." Vincent looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I respect that." For the first time, Jasmine felt like she was standing on equal ground with him. Not beneath him, not a servant, but someone who had earned the right to be here, to be seen. And she knew, in that moment, that this was only the beginning. The days following Jasmine's revelation in Vincent's office felt like a blur. It wasn't that things had changed overnight, but there was a shift in the air. Vincent was different now, and Jasmine was different too. The mansion, which had once felt like a cold, indifferent place, now felt like a new world. A world where Jasmine no longer had to hide, no longer had to shrink into the background. Her new role wasn't official, but it felt like she had stepped into something more. She found herself more confident, more assertive, and Vincent seemed to recognize that in her. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine continued to assist Vincent with various business matters, reviewing contracts, making recommendations, and offering her insight. He didn't just treat her as an employee anymore. There was a mutual respect between them that hadn't existed before. Yet, despite all this, Jasmine never allowed herself to forget where she had come from. She knew better than to let this new power go to her head. She had earned everything she had, and she wasn't about to let anyone forget that. But it wasn't just the business side of things that changed. Jasmine's relationship with Vincent began to evolve in ways she hadn't expected. She had always seen him as a powerful, intimidating figure, someone who held the keys to her future. But now, as they spent more time together, Jasmine started to see a different side of him. He was no longer just the Mafia boss who could control everything around him with a snap of his fingers. He was someone who was vulnerable, someone who had made mistakes, and someone who was trying to change. One afternoon, as Jasmine was sitting in the office, going over some financial reports, Vincent walked in, looking more tense than usual. She glanced up from her work, noticing the shift in his demeanor. "Jasmine," he said, his voice quieter than normal. "I need your help with something." Jasmine's curiosity piqued, and she set the papers down. "What is it?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. Vincent hesitated, looking as though he were struggling with something. "I've made some bad decisions in the past," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Things I thought I could control, but I couldn't. And now, it's catching up to me." Jasmine felt a pang of sympathy for him. She had never imagined that Vincent, the ruthless Mafia boss, would open up to her like this. "What kind of decisions?" she asked gently. He sat down across from her, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. "I've been involved in some deals that I shouldn't have been," he admitted. "People I shouldn't have worked with. And now, they're threatening everything I've built." Jasmine listened intently, her eyes never leaving his. She had always known Vincent was involved in things that weren't exactly legal, but hearing him speak so openly about it was a different experience. "I didn't want to get you involved in any of this," Vincent continued, "but I think you might be the only person I can trust." Jasmine's heart raced. She wasn't sure what he was asking, but she knew this was important. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady. Vincent looked at her, his expression serious. "I need you to help me figure out a way to get out of this situation," he said. "I've made a mess, and I need someone who can see things clearly. Someone who isn't clouded by the past." Jasmine paused for a moment, taking in what he had said. This was it. The moment when she could prove herself once again. She had always known that Vincent saw her as more than just a maid, but now, she could see that he was counting on her. "I'll help you," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. "But we're doing this my way." Vincent raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her response. "Your way?" he asked. Jasmine nodded. "I'm not going to play your game, Vincent, but I will help you fix this, as long as you're willing to change." There was a long silence as Vincent processed her words. For the first time, he didn't speak with authority or demand anything from her. Instead, he seemed to consider her request seriously. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's do it your way." Over the next few weeks, Jasmine worked closely with Vincent to clean up the mess he had created. It wasn't easy. There were people involved who didn't want to let go of their power, and there were plenty of obstacles along the way. But Jasmine used her sharp mind and attention to detail, and little by little, they made progress. She never let Vincent forget the stakes of what they were doing. This wasn't just about business. This was about redemption, and Jasmine was determined to make sure they did it the right way. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and phone calls, Vincent and Jasmine sat in his office, reviewing the final steps of their plan. "I couldn't have done this without you," Vincent said, his voice filled with sincerity. Jasmine smiled. though there was no smugness in her expression. "I told you, Vincent," she said. "This isn't just about you. It's about both of us." As the night wore on, Vincent seemed to relax for the first time in weeks. Jasmine had proven herself to be more than just a maid. She had become someone he could rely on, someone who could help him find his way out of the mess he had made. And though their relationship had started with mistrust and manipulation, it had evolved into something else, something that neither of them had expected. In that moment, Jasmine knew that she had finally found her place, not just in Vincent's world, but in the world she had always dreamed of. A world where she was seen for who she truly was, someone with strength, intelligence, and integrity. And that, she realized, was worth more than anything Vincent could ever offer her. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine's new role within the mansion became clearer. She had proven herself to Vincent in ways she hadn't even imagined. The respect she had fought for was now hers, and with it came a sense of responsibility. She was no longer just an observer in Vincent's world. She was a participant, an equal, and Vincent seemed to recognize her contribution. The more they worked together, the more she realized how much she had grown. What had once felt like a prison was now a space where she could thrive. As the mansion's operations began to improve, so did the dynamics between Jasmine and Vincent. He began to trust her more, allowing her to handle tasks that were once far beyond her reach. He had even started asking for her opinions on personal matters, not just business. It was a subtle change, but one Jasmine noticed. One afternoon, after a long day of reviewing documents and overseeing meetings, Vincent invited Jasmine to his private study. It was the first time they had spent any real time together outside of work, and Jasmine couldn't help but wonder what this meeting would entail. When she arrived, she found Vincent sitting at his desk, looking over a stack of papers. His usual stern demeanor had softened, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. Jasmine stood by the door for a moment, unsure whether to enter, but Vincent looked up and smiled. "Come in, Jasmine," he said, his voice calm. Jasmine walked in and took a seat across from him. "I've been thinking about everything we've accomplished together," Vincent began. "You've done more than just help me with the business side of things. You've changed how I see things. You've shown me a different way to approach my life." Jasmine looked at him, trying to understand where this was going. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said quietly. Vincent leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. "You've made me realize that there's more to life than just power and control. You've reminded me that integrity and respect are what truly matter." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She had always known that Vincent was capable of change, but hearing him say these words made everything feel real. "I never thought I could trust anyone like I trust you," Vincent continued. "You've proven me wrong, Jasmine. You've earned more than just my respect. You've earned my trust." Jasmine smiled softly, a warmth spreading through her chest. It was more than she had ever expected, more than she had ever imagined. "Thank you, Vincent," she replied, her voice steady. "But this isn't just about me. It's about us. We've both changed. We've both made choices to be better." Vincent nodded, his gaze intense. "You're right," he said, "and I want you to know that I'm committed to making things right. Not just with the business, but with everything." Jasmine felt a surge of hope. For the first time in a long time, she felt like Vincent was truly seeing her, not as a maid or an employee, but as a person with worth. "What do you mean by everything?" Jasmine asked. Her curiosity piqued. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a deep breath, he spoke. "I want you to be a part of my future, Jasmine. Not just in the business, but in my life. I know that I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right." Jasmine's heart raced. She had never expected this, never imagined that Vincent, of all people, would make such an offer. She had come to this mansion thinking she was just a maid, a servant, someone who would never truly matter. But now, everything was changing. Everything had already changed. "I don't know what to say," Jasmine said, her voice soft. Vincent smiled, his eyes warm. "You don't have to say anything yet, but I want you to know that I'm serious. I want you to be a part of my life, in whatever way that means." Jasmine sat in stunned silence, trying to process what he was saying. She had always known that Vincent was powerful, that he held the keys to so many things. But now, he was offering her something even more valuable than power. He was offering her a chance to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. It was a gift she had never expected. a gift she wasn't sure she was ready for. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this was the opportunity of a lifetime. This was her chance to be more than just the woman who cleaned the mansion. This was her chance to build a life, a future, on her own terms. "I'll do it," Jasmine said, her voice firm. Vincent's smile grew wider, and for the first time, Jasmine saw a glimpse of the man behind the Mafia boss. The man who was capable of change. The man who was willing to make things right. "I'm glad to hear that," he said, standing up from his desk. "We've both been through a lot. But now, we have the chance to build something real." Jasmine stood up as well, her heart filled with a sense of possibility. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. Ready to face it with Vincent by her side. As she walked out of the study that evening, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had finally found her place, not just in the mansion, but in the world. A world where she wasn't just a maid. She was a person with power, with voice, and with a future of her own making. And that, she realized, was worth more than anything else she could have ever imagined. The days that followed were a blur of change. Jasmine had made the decision to step fully into her new role, and Vincent's offer was more than just a chance to rise in status. It was an opportunity to prove to herself and to him that she was capable of so much more than what she had once been limited to. She was no longer just a maid. She was someone who mattered, someone whose opinion had value. Yet, despite this newfound sense of purpose, Jasmine couldn't shake the quiet fears that lingered in the back of her mind. The mansion was still the same grand structure it had always been, with its towering walls and lavish rooms, but the air felt different now. There was a tension that she couldn't fully explain. It wasn't just because of her new responsibilities, it was because Vincent himself was changing. And with change came uncertainty. She had watched him from a distance, observing his actions and the way he interacted with others. There were times when he seemed almost distant, his eyes clouded with thoughts she could not quite grasp. At other times, he seemed more open, more vulnerable. It was as if the walls he had built around himself were beginning to crumble, and Jasmine found herself torn between admiration and caution. She couldn't forget who he was. Vincent Coletti was a Mafia boss, a man who had built his empire on power and fear. But Jasmine knew now that there was more to him than just that ruthless persona. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the mansion, Jasmine found herself standing in the study, going through some old files that Vincent had asked her to review. The house was quiet, and the stillness made the room feel even larger than it already was. She was focused on the task at hand, carefully organizing papers, when she heard the soft click of the door behind her. She turned around to see Vincent standing in the doorway, his gaze soft but intense. "Jasmine," he said, his voice quiet. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" She nodded, setting the papers aside as she stood up. "Of course." Vincent stepped into the room, his usual confident stride replaced with something more reserved. He wasn't wearing his suit today, just a simple shirt and pants, his sleeves rolled up as though he had been working. His hair, usually perfectly styled, was slightly tousled. "I've been thinking," he began, his eyes searching hers. "About everything. About us." Jasmine felt a flicker of unease. They had already talked about a lot of things, about the business, about their shared goals, but something in his tone told her that this conversation would be different. She stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. Vincent took a deep breath, running his hand through his hair. "I know I haven't always been the easiest person to work with," he said, "and I haven't always treated people the way they deserve." Jasmine was surprised by his admission. She had always known that Vincent wasn't the most compassionate person, but hearing him speak like this made her realize just how much he had changed. "I know I've made a lot of mistakes," Vincent continued, "and I've hurt people along the way. People who trusted me, people who believed in me, and I can't undo that." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with regret. Jasmine didn't know what to say. She had seen this side of him before, in the moments when his guard was down. It was the side of him that he kept hidden from the world, the side of him that still carried the weight of his past. "But you've changed," she said softly, her voice steady. "I've seen it. I've seen the way you've started to make things right." Vincent looked at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You think so?" he asked, as if he was seeking her validation. Jasmine nodded. "I do." Vincent smiled, though it was a small smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. I want to keep changing, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to be better. Not just for the business, but for myself. For you. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. For the first time, Vincent wasn't just talking about the business. He was talking about personal change. And he was talking about it. In relation to her. It was a step towards something deeper, something more real than the surface-level connection they had shared before. You've already made a difference, Jasmine said, her voice filled with sincerity. You've made me see that there's more to life than just survival. You've made me believe in the possibility of something better. There was a long silence as Vincent absorbed her words. For a moment, it seemed as if time had slowed down, and all that mattered was the quiet exchange between the two of them. I don't know where this is going, Vincent said eventually, his voice barely audible. But I want to find out. Together. Jasmine's pulse quickened, and she realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when she could let go of the past and step into something new, something that was hers, something that was real. She stepped closer to him, her eyes locked on his. We'll figure it out, she said quietly. Together. In that moment, everything seemed possible. For the first time, Jasmine could see a future where she wasn't just a maid, where she wasn't just a part of Vincent's world. She saw a future where she was equal, where she could stand beside him as not just an ally, but as something more. They didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, they were willing to find out. They were willing to take that step together, into the unknown, and it felt like freedom. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine felt a deep sense of change in the air. Vincent's offer to work alongside him had shifted the dynamic between them, and it wasn't just in the professional sense. There was a new understanding between them, a shared goal of building something more than just business. The mansion, once a place of cold walls and hidden agendas, had become a place of possibility. Jasmine no longer looked at the grand halls and felt invisible. She walked with her head held high, no longer afraid of being overlooked or disregarded. But she also knew she had to tread carefully. Vincent's transformation, though genuine, was still a work in progress. He had admitted his mistakes, but Jasmine understood that it would take more than just words to change a man who had spent his life building an empire on power and control. They had come a long way, but Jasmine knew they weren't there yet. One evening, as she sat in her small room reviewing some papers, she heard a knock at the door. It was late, and she wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door to find Vincent standing there, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something softer, more contemplative. Jasmine, I need to talk to you, he said, his voice low. She stepped aside to let him in, her heart suddenly racing. Of course, Vincent, she replied, unsure of what was coming. He closed the door behind him and took a seat at the small table where Jasmine had been working. His eyes were focused on the floor, as though he were trying to find the right words. I've been thinking about what we've been building together, Vincent began, his voice quiet. And I know that it's not just about the business. It's about more than that. Jasmine nodded, waiting for him to continue. She could sense that there was more to this conversation than he was letting on. I've been thinking about the future, he said, finally looking up at her. And about what I want my life to look like. I've spent so long focused on building my empire, on making money, on gaining power. But I've realized that I've been missing something. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She had never heard Vincent speak like this before. She had always known him as the strong, confident man who never showed any sign of vulnerability. But now, there was something in his eyes, a softness that made her see him in a new light. What are you saying? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent took a deep breath before answering. I'm saying that I want to change. I want to build something that's not just for me, but for us. Something that matters, something that lasts. Jasmine felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment when everything could shift. She had known that Vincent was capable of change, but now he was offering her something more. He was offering her a future. And what does that mean for us? She asked, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. Vincent stood up and walked over to the window, his back turned to her as he looked out over the sprawling estate. It means that I want you to be part of that future, he said quietly. Not just as someone who works for me, but as someone who is with me. Someone who shares in the decisions, who has a say in what happens next. Jasmine stood frozen, unable to fully process his words. This was more than she had ever expected, more than she had ever dreamed of. For so long, she had believed that her place in Vincent's world was limited to being a maid, a servant. But now, Vincent was offering her something far more valuable, his trust, his partnership. "I don't know what to say," Jasmine whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "You don't have to say anything," Vincent replied, turning to face her. "I just need you to know that I'm serious. I want you to be with me, not just in the business, but in everything." Jasmine's heart raced as she tried to absorb his words. She had always known that she was capable of more than just serving others, but now, with Vincent's offer, she saw a path forward that was full of possibilities. She wasn't just working for him anymore. She was working with him. They were building something together. "I want that too," she said finally, her voice steady. "I want to be part of your future." Vincent smiled, his eyes softening. "I'm glad to hear that," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "Because together, we can make this work. We can build something that's not just about power or money, but about something real, something worth fighting for." Jasmine smiled back, feeling a sense of hope stir in her chest. For the first time, she believed in the possibility of a future where she wasn't just someone in the background, someone to be overlooked. She was a partner, and that, she realized, was worth more than anything else. As the days passed, Vincent and Jasmine worked side by side, making decisions together, building their future one step at a time. The mansion that had once felt like a prison now felt like a home, one where they could both create something new, something that mattered. Jasmine had always dreamed of a life where she was more than just a maid, where she could stand on her own 2 feet and be respected for who she was. And now, with Vincent by her side, she was finally living that dream. The days grew longer, and the bond between Jasmine and Vincent continued to deepen. There were still challenges ahead, issues that came with the nature of Vincent's past and the world he had built, but they faced them together with a mutual understanding that had never existed before. Vincent had kept his word. He treated Jasmine not just as an employee, but as an equal, a partner in everything they did. The mansion, which had once been a symbol of his power and control, now felt more like a place of possibility. They were both starting to see it that way. Jasmine had found herself settling into her new role, finding a balance between her duties in the business and the trust Vincent had placed in her. Every decision they made was carefully considered, and Jasmine's voice carried weight. She had a stake in this world now, not just as an observer, but as an active participant. One evening, as they were finishing up a long meeting in the study, Vincent leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "I think we've finally got a handle on this," he said, his voice weary but relieved. Jasmine looked at him, sensing the exhaustion in his posture. "We're getting there," she agreed, but there was still a long road ahead. Vincent met her eyes and smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said softly. Jasmine's heart warmed at his words, but she wasn't used to hearing him speak with such vulnerability. It was a side of him she had come to appreciate, but it still caught her off guard. "You did it," she replied. "I just helped you see the way." He looked at her thoughtfully, as if considering her words. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but you've shown me what it means to trust someone. You've shown me how to lead in a different way." There was a long pause as they both sat in the silence of the study, the weight of their shared journey hanging between them. Jasmine had never imagined she would be here, sitting beside Vincent in this grand room, helping to shape the future of everything he had worked for. And yet, here she was. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about their shared path forward, about creating something together that wasn't based on power or fear, but on respect. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and more conversations about the future. Vincent's transformation was becoming more apparent, not just in his actions, but in the way he interacted with everyone around him. His hardened exterior had softened, and Jasmine could see the cracks in the walls he had spent so long building. It wasn't easy, but he was making the effort. And Jasmine, for the first time in her life, was seeing him for who he truly was. The man behind the reputation. She had always known there was more to him than just a mafia boss, but now, she saw the man who was trying to change, who was willing to fight for something better. And it wasn't just about the business. It was about him, about his past, and about the person he wanted to become. One day, as they were sitting in Vincent's office, going over the final details of a new project, Vincent looked at Jasmine with a seriousness in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low, "about everything. About us." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat, and she set down the papers she had been reviewing. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady, though she couldn't hide the curiosity in her eyes. Vincent leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I've spent my life building an empire, but I've never had anyone to share it with," he said quietly. "I've never had anyone I could trust, someone who could stand by my side, not just for the business, but for everything else. But you've shown me what it means to trust someone, what it means to have a partner." Jasmine felt a lump form in her throat at his words. She had never imagined that Vincent would be so open, so vulnerable. It was a side of him she had never seen before, and it made her realize just how far they had come. "I want you to know something," Vincent continued, his voice filled with sincerity. "I want you in my life, Jasmine. Not just in the business. I want you to be with me, to be a part of everything I do. I've never asked anyone for that, but with you, it feels different. You've earned more than my trust. You've earned a place in my life." Jasmine's heart raced as she processed his words. She had never expected this moment, but now that it was here, she could feel the weight of it. She had come into this world thinking she would always be on the outside, always just a maid in the background. But now, Vincent was offering her something more, something real, something that was hers. "I don't know what to say," Jasmine said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Vincent smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "I just needed you to know how I feel." Jasmine nodded, her eyes meeting his. "I feel the same way," she said, her voice steady and filled with certainty. Vincent's smile widened, and in that moment, Jasmine knew that their partnership wasn't just about business. It was about something much deeper, something that neither of them had ever expected but both of them needed. As they continued to build their future together, Jasmine realized that she had finally found a place where she belonged. Not just as a maid, not just as Vincent's partner in the business, but as someone who was truly seen, truly valued. And with Vincent by her side, she knew there was nothing they couldn't achieve. The months passed, and the changes that had begun between Jasmine and Vincent grew deeper. Their partnership had moved beyond the confines of business. It was clear to both of them that something real had blossomed between them, something that neither had expected but both had quietly yearned for. The mansion that had once been filled with tension now seemed to pulse with the quiet hum of possibility. Jasmine had become an integral part of Vincent's world, not just as a trusted advisor, but as someone who shared in his vision for the future. She had always dreamed of having a place where she was respected, where her voice mattered, and now she had it. It wasn't just about the business. It was about their life, their future, and the trust they had built between them. One evening, as they sat in the library going over some new contracts, Vincent closed the file in front of him and looked at Jasmine. His expression was serious, his brow furrowed as though he was deep in thought. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," he said quietly. Jasmine looked up from her papers, her heart skipping a beat. She had learned to read his moods, and she could tell this wasn't just about business. "What's on your mind?" she asked, setting the papers aside. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. "We've come a long way," he began, "and I've been thinking a lot about the future." Jasmine felt a flutter of anticipation in her chest. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady. Vincent met her gaze, his eyes softening. "I mean that we've built something incredible here, Jasmine, and I want you to be a part of everything that comes next." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure where this was going, but she knew Vincent's words meant something important. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice low. Vincent stood up and walked over to the window, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out into the night. "I want you to be with me," he said quietly. "Not just in the business, but in everything. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I realize that I don't want to build this future alone." Jasmine felt a rush of emotions. She had always known that Vincent was capable of great things, but hearing him say those words made something inside her stir. "You've shown me what it means to trust someone," Vincent continued, "and I want to trust you with everything. I want you to be more than just my partner in business. I want you to be my partner in life." Jasmine's heart raced. She had never imagined this moment would come. Vincent, the man who had built an empire on power and control, was offering her a chance to be part of something real, something that was about more than just the business. Vincent, Jasmine began, but Vincent held up a hand, silencing her. You don't have to say anything, he said gently. I just need you to know how I feel. I want you in my life, Jasmine. In every way. Jasmine felt the weight of his words settle over her, a mixture of disbelief and hope rising in her chest. This wasn't just about being respected anymore. It was about something deeper, something more profound. For the first time, she realized that Vincent wasn't just offering her a role in his world. He was offering her a place by his side, a place where she was seen as more than just a servant. I've never asked anyone for this before, Vincent said, his voice soft. But with you, it feels different. Jasmine stood up, walking over to him, her heart full. I don't need to be asked, she said, her voice steady with determination. I want this too. Vincent smiled, the warmth in his eyes making Jasmine's chest tighten. I'm glad to hear that, he said, because this is just the beginning. We've built something strong, but there's so much more ahead of us. Jasmine looked up at him, her eyes filled with the promise of everything that could be. She had never thought she would find herself here, standing side by side with Vincent, not just as his partner in business, but as someone who mattered to him in a way she had never imagined. Let's build it together, she said, her voice soft but firm. Vincent nodded, his gaze steady. Together. The days that followed were filled with new plans and possibilities. They made decisions together, their partnership growing stronger with every passing day. It wasn't just about making money or gaining power anymore. It was about creating something that was real, something that could stand the test of time. Jasmine had always dreamed of being part of something bigger, but she had never imagined that it would be like this. She had found her place not just in Vincent's world, but in the world she had always wanted for herself. A world where she was valued, where her voice mattered. As she looked out over the estate, standing next to Vincent, Jasmine realized that she had finally found her home. It wasn't the mansion or the wealth or the power that defined her place. It was the connection they shared, the trust they had built. Together, they had created something that was truly theirs. And with that, Jasmine knew that whatever the future held, she was ready to face it. Ready to face it with Vincent by her side. As weeks turned into months, the connection between Jasmine and Vincent deepened even further. What had started as a professional relationship, built on trust and mutual respect, had grown into something more personal. Jasmine found herself not just working alongside Vincent, but truly understanding him in ways she hadn't thought possible. Their partnership had become a force in itself. In the early days, Jasmine had been cautious, aware of the power dynamics between them. She had known Vincent for his reputation as a Mafia boss, a man who ruled with an iron fist, a man who could make or break lives with a snap of his fingers. But now, the more she saw the man behind the mask, the more she realized that he was a person too. Someone who was capable of growth, someone who was trying to shed the layers of his past and become something more. It wasn't easy. They faced challenges, some from outside forces and others from their own insecurities. Vincent's past was never far behind him, and though he had changed in many ways, there were moments when the old habits would resurface. Jasmine had learned to handle these moments with patience. She had learned to recognize when Vincent was struggling with his own demons and when he needed space. But she also knew that they were stronger together, and that was something Vincent had come to realize as well. One evening, as they sat in the study, reviewing financial reports for the new expansion project, Vincent put down the papers and looked at her. I've been thinking, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Jasmine looked up, sensing that this wasn't just about the business. About what? She asked. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. About us. About everything we've been through. Jasmine felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but she was ready to listen. What about us? She asked, her voice steady but laced with curiosity. Vincent met her gaze, his eyes searching hers. I know I haven't always been the easiest person to be around, he said, his voice tinged with a vulnerability she hadn't expected. I've made mistakes, I've pushed people away, and I've hurt people along the way. But you. He paused, as if gathering his thoughts. You've been different. You've shown me that I don't have to do everything alone, that I can trust someone. And I never realized how much I needed that. Jasmine's heart softened at his words. She had never seen Vincent like this before, so open, so honest. I've always known that you've had more to offer than just your power and control, she said softly. I've seen the man behind the boss. And I believe in you. Vincent smiled, a small but genuine smile that made his eyes light up. You're the only one who ever saw that, he said quietly. And it means everything to me. Jasmine felt her chest tighten with emotion. She had always known that there was more to Vincent than what he showed the world. But hearing him speak these words made her feel something deeper, something that she had never expected to feel. I'm not perfect, Vincent continued, his voice steady but filled with regret. But I want to keep moving forward. I want to be better. For you, for the business, for everything we're building. Jasmine reached across the desk, taking his hand in hers. You don't have to be perfect, she said gently. You just have to keep trying. We're both doing that. Vincent's eyes softened, and for a moment, the weight of everything they had been through seemed to melt away. They were no longer just two people working together. They were partners, in every sense of the word. I never imagined I'd be here, Vincent said, his voice barely above a whisper. I never imagined I'd be the kind of man who could have a partner like you. Someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Jasmine smiled, squeezing his hand. We both have our doubts, she said. But together, we're stronger. The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding between them. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about a future they were building together, a future that held more promise than either of them had ever dreamed. The next few months passed quickly. They worked side by side, making decisions that shaped the future of the business. Jasmine continued to prove her worth, not just as a partner in the business, but as someone who was indispensable to Vincent. She had found a place in his world that was hers to keep, and Vincent had found someone he could trust completely. There were still obstacles to overcome, challenges that tested their resolve. But Jasmine and Vincent faced them together, with a sense of unity that had once seemed impossible. Vincent had opened up in ways he hadn't with anyone before, and Jasmine had learned to trust him with her own vulnerabilities. They had found a balance, a partnership that wasn't based on power or control, but on respect and trust. As they sat together in the study one evening, reviewing the final details of the new business venture, Vincent looked at Jasmine with a sense of pride. We've come a long way, he said, his voice filled with admiration. Jasmine smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. We have, she agreed, her voice steady. But we're just getting started. Vincent nodded, his gaze softening. I know, and I'm glad you're here with me. Jasmine met his gaze, her heart swelling with emotion. They had built something together, a partnership that wasn't just about business, but about life. And for the first time, Jasmine knew that she had found her place in the world, not just beside Vincent, but in a future that was theirs to create. The months continued to pass, and with each passing day, Jasmine and Vincent's bond grew stronger. They had built something remarkable together, both in the business and in their personal lives. The mansion that once felt like a cold, daunting place now felt like home, not just because of the opulence that surrounded them, but because it was filled with a new kind of energy. It was filled with trust, respect, and love. Jasmine had always been aware of her role in Vincent's world, but now, she was fully immersed in it. She was not just an observer. She was an active participant in the decisions that shaped their future. Vincent had given her a place by his side, and in return, Jasmine had proven herself to be indispensable, not just as a partner in business, but as someone who made a difference in his life. One evening, as they sat together in the drawing room, the soft glow of the fireplace casting shadows across the walls, Vincent turned to Jasmine with a thoughtful expression. We've come a long way, he said, his voice calm but filled with a sense of reflection. Jasmine smiled, leaning back into her chair. We have, she replied, her voice steady. But there's still so much to do. Vincent nodded. I know, there's always more to do, but I've realized something lately. Jasmine raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What's that? Vincent paused, taking a deep breath before speaking. I've spent so much of my life focused on control, on building something that was mine, something that I could call my own. But now, I see that the most important thing isn't just what we build, but who we build it with. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat as she looked at him, her eyes meeting his with a new understanding. And who are we building it with? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent's gaze softened, and he reached for her hand, his fingers brushing lightly against hers. With each other, he said simply. I can't imagine doing this without you. Jasmine's chest tightened at his words. For so long, she had been the one trying to prove herself, trying to show that she was more than just a maid, more than just someone working in the background. But now she understood. Vincent had already seen her for who she truly was, someone capable of so much more, someone worthy of being by his side. I never imagined this, Jasmine said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I never imagined I would be here, doing this. With you. Vincent smiled, his expression warm and genuine. And yet, here we are. They sat in silence for a few moments, the crackling of the fire the only sound in the room. Jasmine felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had always known that Vincent was a man capable of great things, but now, she saw him differently. He wasn't just the powerful Mafia boss she had once feared. He was someone who had the courage to change, someone who had learned to trust her, to trust themselves, and to build something that would last. As the evening wore on, they talked about the future, about the changes they had made and the challenges they would face. They made plans for the next phase of their business, but it wasn't just about strategy or growth. It was about building a life together. A life where they were partners in every sense of the word. Jasmine had come a long way from the woman who had first stepped into Vincent's world. She had been quiet, uncertain of her place, unsure of what the future held. But now, she felt confident, secure in her role, and in her relationship with Vincent. They had faced so much together, and every obstacle they overcame had brought them closer. There was no longer any doubt in her mind that they were meant to be together, not just in business, but in life. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings and plans, but amid the chaos, Jasmine and Vincent found time for themselves. They spent evenings walking through the gardens, talking about everything and nothing at all. It was in these moments that Jasmine realized just how much they had grown, how far they had come. There was a quiet understanding between them now, a sense of harmony that had been missing before. Vincent had once been a man who kept his distance, who trusted no one. But now, he was opening up in ways Jasmine never thought possible. And she, too, was changing. She was no longer the maid who hid in the background. She was a woman who stood tall beside him, not just as a partner in business, but as someone who was truly seen. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, Jasmine looked out at the sprawling estate, the sun casting a golden glow over the grounds. She turned to Vincent, who was sitting beside her, lost in thought. "Do you ever think about what we've accomplished?" she asked. Vincent looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "All the time," he said softly. "But what matters most is what comes next." Jasmine smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "And what comes next?" Vincent met her gaze, a quiet determination in his eyes. "We keep building. Together." Jasmine nodded, her eyes sparkling with a sense of certainty. Together. They sat there for a long time, their hands intertwined, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The future was theirs to shape, and Jasmine was more than ready to take on whatever came next, as long as Vincent was by her side. As the months turned into a year, Jasmine and Vincent's life together continued to unfold in ways neither of them had expected. What had started as a partnership in business had blossomed into a deep, unshakable bond built on trust, respect, and love. They were no longer just business partners. They had become partners in every sense of the word. The mansion, once a cold symbol of power, now felt like a home. It was filled with warmth, not just from the fireplace, but from the understanding they had cultivated between them. Jasmine had finally found her place, not just in Vincent's world, but in the world she had always wanted for herself. She was no longer the quiet maid who had to prove herself. She was now a confident woman, standing tall beside Vincent as an equal. They had come a long way, and the future looked brighter with each passing day. But as they stood on the brink of something new, there was still work to be done. The business had grown, but so had the challenges. Vincent, despite all the changes, still had enemies, and there were still battles to be fought in the world they inhabited. Yet, they faced it all together. One afternoon, Vincent called Jasmine into his office, his expression more serious than usual. As she entered, he gestured for her to sit across from him. The room was quiet, the soft ticking of the clock the only sound. "We've done a lot," Vincent began, his voice steady. "But there's still a lot more to do. We're not done yet." Jasmine nodded, understanding. She had always known that building something meaningful wasn't a quick process. I know, she said, her voice calm. But we've made it this far. We can make it through anything. Vincent's gaze softened, and for a moment, the weight of their shared experiences seemed to hang in the air between them. I couldn't have done this without you, Jasmine, he said quietly. You've been more than just a partner in business. You've been the one who has helped me become the man I am today. And for that, I'm grateful. Jasmine's heart swelled at his words. She had never imagined that she would become such an integral part of his life. When she had first entered his world, she had thought of herself as nothing more than a servant. But now, she was someone who mattered, someone who was shaping the future with him. I've always believed in you, Jasmine replied, her voice steady. From the beginning, I knew there was more to you than what people saw. Vincent smiled, a rare and genuine smile that reached his eyes. And I've learned to believe in myself, thanks to you, he said softly. But there's something I need to tell you. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat, sensing that this conversation was going to change things. What is it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. I've been thinking about the future, about what we've built together, and I want to make sure that we're both on the same page. Jasmine leaned forward, sensing the seriousness of his words. What do you mean? She asked. Vincent stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the sprawling estate. I want you to know that everything we've built, this business, this life, it's all for both of us. I've spent so much of my life focused on what I wanted, what I could control. But now, I realize that what matters most is what we create together. Jasmine's chest tightened as she listened to him. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when Vincent was finally offering her something she had never imagined. Not just a partnership in business, but a partnership in life. I want you to be with me, Vincent continued, turning to face her. Not just as a partner in the business, but as someone who shares my life. I want us to build something that lasts, not just for us, but for the future. Jasmine felt a surge of emotion, and for a moment, she was speechless. She had never thought Vincent would offer her this. His life, his future. I want that too, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Vincent's expression softened, and he stepped closer to her, taking her hand in his. I know we've both come a long way, he said quietly. But we're not done yet. We still have so much to build. Together. Jasmine smiled, her heart full. Together, she repeated, her voice steady. They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared future settling over them. They had faced so many challenges, but now, they knew that they were stronger for it. Together, they could face anything. The rest of the day passed in a blur of plans and decisions. Jasmine and Vincent worked side by side, making choices that would shape the future of the business and their lives. But it wasn't just about the work. It was about their relationship, about the trust they had built and the love that had grown between them. As the sun set over the mansion, casting a golden glow over the estate, Jasmine stood beside Vincent, looking out at the world they were building together. She knew there would still be challenges, obstacles to overcome. But with Vincent by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would build a future that was theirs, a future filled with possibility, with love, and with the strength they had found in each other.